And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Friday morning's flying weather. Narrow band of IFR with that much weakened front now here across the Bering Sea down into the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, marginal VFR eastern Aleutians, and then becoming mostly VFR for the central western Bering Sea and the Aleutian chain. Good VFR here in the central interior with some IFR over to the east there, and some more IFR for the north slope out to the eastern Arctic coast. And for the Panhandle, IFR with marginal VFR out toward the coastline. For the afternoon hours, still marginal VFR for the Panhandle, but gradually improving, just linking out Glacier Bay areas, Haines on up to Skagway in the IFR zone. Still some marginal VFR here over the eastern Alaska range from the roughly about the Yukon River there, Eagle, southward into the Wrangell Mountains. VFR, Copper River Basin and Prince William Sound, south central Alaska, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, much of the interior here, some marginal VFR, Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue to Norton Sound, and along the coastal areas of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta down to the Alaska Peninsula, a little bit of IFR here just south of St. Lawrence Island, marginal VFR from the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast. And not too bad out here over the Bering Sea, just some areas of marginal VFR. And then for Saturday morning, some IFR shows up here over the southeastern Bering Sea, but mostly north of the Aleutians, and a little bit of IFR along the Yukon Delta coast and Nunivak Island, but now up across St. Lawrence Island. And IFR, North Slope, and portions of the Arctic coast. VFR, Central Interior, right on down again, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island. Marginal VFR, Copper River Basin, and Panhandle, still IFR in the north there, but VFR, Prince of Wales Island. And for Saturday afternoon, becomes pretty nice there for the southeast coast, mostly VFR conditions. Good VFR for the North Gulf Coast into the Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island again, and the interior all the way up to the Brooks Range. Then it's marginal VFR there to the Arctic coast and down along the western areas here, Seward Peninsula, northwest coast all the way down to Togiak Bay, Dillingham right on the edge there, but King Salmon and Naknek, those areas should be VFR. And for the Alaska Peninsula, all of the Aleutians and Bering Sea, it's looking pretty marginal. And for the passes, Anatuvik and Adigan, looking at marginal VFR conditions for Friday. And for the Western Alaska Range, Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR, rainy, VFR, windy, marginal VFR, becoming VFR throughout the day. Isabel, marginal VFR at times the entire day, and Mentasta, same thing, marginal VFR. With Tanita, VFR, Portage, VFR, Chilkoot and White, still looking like IFR for both passes there. And for the freezing levels, 2,000 to 3,000 feet over the interior here, and tomorrow morning at the surface all the way down to the North Gulf Coast during the early morning hours. Otherwise, pretty good gradient here across the Panhandle from 6,000 to 12,000 feet, and out over the Bering Sea, 6,000 to 8,000 feet, and about 10,000 feet over the Aleutians. Icing, a little bit of considerable moderate rime icing here, Adak and Atka, and otherwise some areas of light icing up here in the north, and then along that weakening front there, some possible icing up potential there from the Alaska Peninsula, right on up along the southwest coast of St. Lawrence Island. A little bit better chance there over the northern Panhandle. And the jet stream got some higher pressure here over the western interior area, so we got northerly flow, but not all that strong across south central Alaska, down from the Tanana Valley. Backside of that, southerly flow. Strongest winds here over toward Yakutat, about 95 knots out of the south, and then a pretty strong west-northwest jet here riding along the Aleutians, 150 to 160 knots. And at 9,000 feet, southern Bering Sea, 45 to 50 knot north-northwesterlies coming right down across the eastern Aleutians at about 40 knots. High pressure, light winds here, eastern and northern Bering Sea into the Chukchi Sea. In fact, all interior Alaska looking pretty light here at 9,000 feet. Panhandle, 30, 35 knots out of the south. And at 3,000 feet, pretty light winds here for the southeast coast, Gulf of Alaska. All of the interior here, strongest winds out to the west there in the Bering Sea. Again, west-northwest, 30 to 45 knots. Southerlies at about 25 knots there near Nunivak Island. And for turbulence, not much to look at here. Isolated moderate turbulence, or, well, I'd call it light just light turbulence, St. Lawrence Island and St. Matthew Island, and maybe Shimmy and Attu. And that's about it. Everywhere else looking pretty smooth for the flying conditions on Friday.